Hey folks, we're back again. I'm Derek,
I'm Paul.
and this is part two of our mini series on precipitator assessments. And today we're going to talk about wrapping. And Mr. Precipitator here is probably going to get into other things like aspect ratio and other variables.
Yeah, you do I'm trying to break the assessment down into three parts to make it simple. Last week we talked about velocity and treatment time on how that affects performance of the precipitator. Now I'm going to talk about the wrapping system. Sometimes there's some things you can do to improvement, and there's other times that it's just not set up right to begin with, and you'll not be able to have much options. So we're going to go back over to our white grease board and I'll show it to you. So we're back to my basic drawing of the precipitator, and get more about wrapping. 50% rule of thumb: half your emissions out the stack comes from lack of treatment of voltage, and the other half comes just from wrapping reentrainment. You can't completely stop wrapping reentrainment, but if it's laid out well enough, we can minimize it. We can minimize it so low that it doesn't have really a contribution to stack opacity. But one of the first things you need to look at is your aspect ratio, and that's the length of the precipitator divided by the height. You need your precipitator to be longer than it's taller. If let's say your precipitator is only this long and it's this high, if you go to wrap particulate, it won't fall down into the hopper. By the time it wraps, it'll escape. So like the outlet field, sometimes there's difficulty in wrapping and just escapes straight out. So you need your precipitator to be at least as long as it is tall. So that's an aspect ratio of 1. You'll see some of these high resistivity fly ash precipitators, the aspect ratio is 1.5, 2. The next thing you look at is collecting area per wrapper. Ideally, that's about 1,500 square feet per wrapper. There's two standard designs of wrappers out there, wrapping systems. You have a top wrapping system where all the wrappers are on top of the precipitator. That kind of looks like this here. So here's your anvil beam and your collecting plates hang off of an anvil beam. This wrapper will lift this slug up, it'll drop it, and it'll clean the plates. This anvil beam may have 2 plates on it. It may have 10 plates on it, 12 plates on it. Well, it's the collecting plates that we want to know the area of. So to figure out the area per wrapper, every time this wrapper goes off, how much collecting area is disturbed. So you take the height of the collecting plate times the length of the collecting plate times 2, because there's 2 sides to that collecting plate, times the number of collecting plates per wrapper. So let's say, for an example, a standard size precipitator collecting plate is 9 feet long by 27 feet high. So we got 9 times 27 times 2 sides. So just one plate has a collecting area of 486 square feet. Let's say it's a top wrap and we have 3 plates off of that wrapper. Times 3, 1458. It's actually a really nice design. Let's say there's 10 plates hanging off that anvil beam. Well, now you're up to about 4,700 square feet of collecting area. That's a very high number. So what happens is every time that wrapper goes off, it dislodges several thousand pounds of particulate at one moment. Most of it will go in the hopper. You only need a little bit to go out the stack. Tumbling hammers, this is the big benefit of tumbling hammer type wrappers. Tumbling hammers will have the wrapper at the bottom of the plate, and it'll have 1 hammer per plate. So this is kind of a drawing here. Here's a collecting plate. This is another collecting plate next to it. You got an anvil comes out. 1 hammer comes over and swings over and does that plate. So in a tumbling hammer system, it's always just the square footage of 1 plate. So in this particular design, you'd have, less than 500 square feet per plate. Or say you had one of those big fields like in a utility where it's 14 feet or 12 feet by 50 feet high. You have a tremendous amount of collecting area and you're only hitting 1 plate per wrapper. So if your aspect ratio is less than 1, you're in trouble. You're going to have a tough time reducing wrapping reentrainment, and that's the physical size of the precipitator. If you have MIGI wrappers, and say you need to get it down to 2 plates per wrapper, you could add another wrapper, cut that anvil beam in half, make it 2 anvil beams, and put a wrapper on each side. A little expensive upgrade, but very successful with that. Lowered opacity quite a bit. If you already fit this criteria and you have high opacity, then we need to look at optimizing your wrappers. You know, it could be a sequence problem, you could be hitting it too hard or not hard enough, or you could be having some mechanical failures, and we can look at it. First thing you got to do though is you have to start off with, what do we have? What are we starting with? And then we can figure out what can we do and how much performance can we get.
Well, there you have it, folks. That concludes part 2 of our Precipitator assessment service on wrapping. We were going to bust out a big rhyme for you, but I figured that might not be a good idea.
Yeah, I don't think they want to hear us sing. But, you know, breaking the assessment down, it's important to know what you have on your precipitator to start with, and that's your baseline, and then we can figure out where to improve from there. But the next series, I'm going to talk about voltage and, you know, how to look to see if you even have properly sized TR sets. The requirements for outlet particulate reduction has changed quite a bit through the years. So, you know, your precipitator that may be 40 years old was designed for something completely different than what it's being asked to do today. So, so there you have it. Stay safe.
Be well.